This is how to crochet a modified moss stitch. It's really pretty. All you need is multiples of 2, and we are going to start by adding a single crochet into the second chain from the hook right here. And then we are going to work it just like a regular moss stitch. We're going to chain 1, skip 1, and add a single crochet into the next chain all the way until the end. You should have a single crochet in the very last stitch. But that is all that is happening in this video. If you want to crochet along with me, I'll have the rest of the row up here. If you want to go ahead and move on to part 2, I'll have that posted soon as well. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. And that's it. Now, if you decided to hang around, I thought I could share my 3 favorite tension tips to help you have more even stitch sizes. So the first tip is to make sure that you push the loop back onto the body of the hook every single time. And that's going to keep the stitch tops even. It's going to keep, if you're working with double crochet or larger, it's going to keep those posts even as well. And then the second tip is to use your non-dominant left middle finger and thumb. And you want to put them directly where your hook is going to go or where it just went. So if you watch my left middle finger and thumb here, they're traveling to the next chain first, and then they're working up with the hook as I'm working a single crochet. I do that for every single stitch, and that also helps me make sure that I'm not making the new loops too big or too small. And then the third tip, and probably the easiest to implement, is to make sure that your shoulders are rolled back and that your tongue is not pressing up against the roof of your mouth whenever you get frustrated. It's easier to just put it down, take a breather, do some stretches, and get back to it. But once that starts happening, that's when your stitches are generally super tight and you start to get increasingly more frustrated. If you have any other tension tips, you can leave them in the comments. I want to create a collection of tension tips because I think tension is a hot topic in crochet for some reason. It wasn't always, but it is now. So I hope you have a good day. Be safe. For row 2, we are going to chain 1, and then we are going to turn our work and add the very first single crochet into the first stitch at the base of the turning chain. And then we will start our little modification, and that is to add a double crochet into the first chain space. So right here, that is where we had the chain 1 from row 1, and then we will add a single crochet into the top of the last single crochet or next stitch, and then a double crochet into the chain space, single crochet on top of the single crochet, all the way until the end. And your very last stitch should be a single crochet as well. One thing that I noticed while I was working this round is that sometimes it can be a little difficult to add the single crochet on top of the single crochet, like right here, I'm struggling a little bit. That generally happens, in my experience, when the chain ones in between the single crochet are too tight. So even though when you generally when you go very fast, your chains tend to be a little bit tighter, and in the last video I was talking about making sure you push the loop back onto the body of the hook. What you want to also add here is that you make that loop a little bit bigger than you normally would, because if your chains are too tight, it is going to decrease the size of the stitch tops from the single crochet, and it is going to increase the possibility that your rectangle is going to turn into a trapezoid without dropping any stitches. I always say the moss stitch is the ultimate test of tension. If you can have a perfectly rectangular or square moss stitch swatch, you are an expert at tension. If you are creating shapes that are not perfectly rectangular or square, then you might want to practice a little bit more, and that's not to sound mean, because that's really the only thing that'll fix it, is just getting your muscle memory down, because it's not a skill test as much as it's a muscle memory test, because your hands, they start to remember the movement, and then eventually you can crochet with your eyes closed. But that is all that is happening in this row. If you want to crochet along with me, you're very welcome to stay. If you want to go ahead and move on to part 3, it will be posted soon if it's not already up. Now, if you're still here, I've got a couple more tension tips. I just went through the comments of some of my videos to look for something to talk about, and there's one question I had not been able to answer for a while, and it is what to do if you have gaps between your stitches even though your stitches are tight. And I couldn't figure it out, so I had to experiment a little bit with different crochet hooks and different yarns and the way I was holding my yarn. And the only way that I've been able to replicate that is by using a good hook. The hook size is correct, it matches the yarn size, but pulling the stitches too tight. So my recommendation, it would be kind of counterintuitive to what I generally say. If you have tight stitches, you want to go up a hook size. I would say go down a hook size. Go down a hook size and try not to pull the stitches tight. The urge to pull your stitches tight generally comes with the feeling of the yarn running away from you. And if you're using a larger crochet hook, because that's the go-to response when somebody has tight stitches, it might feel like it's running away even faster, making you feel like you have to work overtime to compensate for that. So instead of going up, go down a hook size and try your best not to pull the stitches tight. If that works, let me know. If it doesn't, I'll keep trying. But that's it. I hope I see you in row 3. And for row 3, we are essentially doing the same thing we did in row 1. Only we're working into stitches instead of chains, but we're gonna chain 1 for the turning chain and then add a single crochet into the very first stitch, chain 1, skip the double crochet, and then add a single crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, skip the double crochet, add a single crochet into the next stitch, all the way until the end, and you should have a single crochet in the very last stitch. That is it for row 3. And actually for the stitch pattern, from here on out, you're just going to alternate rows 2 and 3 until you have the height that you're looking for. I didn't say this before, but I started with 30 chains and I'm going to work until I have 28 rows to get a perfect square. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. If you have any concerns about your own swatch, meaning I think the only concern I'm going to get is mine is not staying rectangular. And that again is generally sized at the chain spaces. The chain ones are too tight. So try that. But other than that, I can't foresee too many problems with this stitch. I think it's pretty and it's fairly beginner friendly in the sense that you're not working with very extravagant stitches, and the only thing that's different from the moss stitch is that in every other row you're adding a double crochet into the chain spaces. So I will see you in the next I added a 4th part to this. I'm going to go over how I added the single crochet border to one side and the bottom. So if you want to stick around for that, I will have that posted soon if it's not up already. I had a couple people ask how to add the single crochet border to how I added to my swatches. So first I chain 1 and then I add my first single crochet right there at the base of that chain 1. Now I'm working along the first side, and if you read this in a pattern, it's going to say single crochet evenly across each side. Sometimes I'll give you how many stitches you want per side. I'm going with 25. And it is honestly just guesswork. I think the biggest tip I have is to pick the halfway point. So the halfway point of 25 is between 12 and 13. And whenever I get to the 12th stitch, I'll look at my swatch and make sure that I'm halfway down. If I'm too close to the beginning, I'll put my stitches back out and skip a couple more spaces that I had previously, or if I'm too close to the beginning, I'll pull my stitches out and add a couple more stitches, and then if I'm too close to the end, I'll pull my stitches out and skip a couple more spots where I'd put stitches before. And that is really the only thing I can think of. Now, if you're a little bit more experienced and you use your, when you're experienced, you use your hands a lot, you start to get a muscle memory, like I talked about before. But your muscle memory can also tell you where you would normally put a single crochet if you were adding one stitch on top of the next on top of the next. And that is going to help you keep your stitches from bunching up in one spot and then stretching out too far in another. For the corners, you want to add 3 single crochet, and that is going to help give you a 90-degree angle. And then the other tip I have is that whatever number you choose to for each side, especially if you're working with a square, that is going to be the number you apply to every side. So even though I started with 30 chains, that means I'm going to have to skip a couple of chains when I get to that side of my swatch in order to get down to 25 for the side. And it's a little counterintuitive to skip chains when you're adding just a row of single crochet, but it is the only way you can get even sides. Then I'm trying to think if I have any more tips. The only other question I've ever gotten was the corner pieces. Do you want to include them in the sides or not? So since I'm adding 3 single crochet in each corner, it's really up to you. I'm not doing that. I include it in my stitch count. So the first 2 stitches start in the corner, and then the last stitch is going to be in the last corner, and then that's how I have 3. But if you wanted to make it a little bit easier on yourself and just have 25 between the first stitch and the last stitch of each side, and then add an extra 3 stitches in the corner, might be a little bit easier than what I'm doing. But if you have any other questions about single crochet borders, you can leave them in the comments and I can try and figure out how to answer them. I hope you have a good day. I hope you're being safe, and that's it. This is what the border will look like at the end, and I hope to see you in the next stitch tutorial. Be sure to like and follow for more.